My name is Becky Oldham. Just a little bit about me. I currently work at Kids Talk, which is a child advocacy center located in Anderson, Indiana, which would be Madison County. So I have been at Kids Talk for 10 years. I'm the manager here, so I kind of manage the day-to-day operations. I'm also a forensic interviewer, victim advocate. I help with prevention as well. And then we have a facility dog and I'm the facility dog handler. So our dog lives with me and comes home with me every day. A little bit about my background. So originally I thought I was going to be an attorney and kind of changed my mind. I was a paralegal for about 6 years, a long time ago. And then I ended up going to work for the Department of Child Services in 2009. So I was an assessor there, which basically just meant I was an investigator of reports that came in. So I mentored new FCMs, actually became a forensic interviewer in 2010 when I worked at DCS. I did all the fatalities and near fatalities and things like that. In 2013, I actually started supervising a unit of assessment workers. And I did that until I went over to Kids Talk in 2015. So, kind of like in my 17th year or finishing up my 17th year in the field of child abuse and neglect. So, a little bit about Kids Talk. Kids Talk opened in August of 2014. So we've been open for 11 years. We originally started with just doing forensic interview. And actually, when I came to Kids Talk in 2015, I started the advocacy part of Kids Talk. Before I came over, there was just one interviewer that was actually only a half-time interviewer because everything is goes by grants because we're a nonprofit. The director got a grant for victim advocacy, so I came over and kind of started building that program. We did become nationally accredited in 2016. We reaccredit every 5 years. So we did that again in 2021, and we'll be getting ready to do that again. It's a really fun process. In 2016, we actually wrote our own body safety, child sexual abuse prevention program and launched that into the schools. So we're in pretty much every school in Madison County. We teach body safety rules. We teach private body part names. What's okay, what's not okay, that sort of thing. And we teach all the way up through seniors in high school. The older program looks a little different. It's more along the lines of legalities, age of consent, kind of versus regret, that sort of thing. We have a lot of I'm sure you guys see this a lot in your work, child pornography, sexting, all the things that kids like to do and don't understand that that's illegal. So we talk a lot about that. To date, we have interviewed just a little over 6,000 children here at Kids Talk. If you're not familiar with what a child advocacy center is, it's really just kind of a safe place where kids can come and talk about something that they've witnessed or experienced. We want it to be kind of a welcoming environment. Before Kids Talk existed, we would actually do forensic interviews at different police departments. And we would do our best to kind of make it friendly, but it was still a police department. They would still wait in the waiting room with the public, that sort of things. The whole purpose is kind of creating a more welcoming space where they feel a little safer and a little more comfortable. And then the main purpose behind CACs is to bring the entire team to the child. So before CACs existed, like I said, we'd do an interview maybe at a police department. So as a DCS worker back then, I would come and do a forensic interview. Even though I was at the police department, I may or may not have a detective even watching my interview. I never had prosecutors there. So there was never really this, cohesive like team approach. Sometimes kids would be interviewed more than once because a detective would want like a couple other questions that weren't asked during the interview. Or prosecutors would want to ask additional questions. So it really was a lot of secondary trauma to the kids having to be interviewed over and over or go to, a DCS office, law enforcement, up to the courthouse. So the way we can do it now is we have the one central location. When I do an interview, I'm in one room, team's in another room watching the interview live. Mine always have DCS, law enforcement, and a prosecutor present. So everybody's hearing all the same information at the same time. They can get their questions answered where I have like a walkie talkie with an earpiece so they can talk to me if they want, additional follow up on something. And it's just more streamlined when the interview's over. There can always be a discussion between DCS, law enforcement, and prosecution about, is there anything that's criminal here? What else needs to be investigated? What are the next steps going to be? So that sort of thing. So that's kind of the whole purpose to child advocacy centers. So this is kind of what I've explained, but it's a nice little visual of what it kind of looked like on the left without a child advocacy center and the family kind of just running around wild everywhere. And then with a child advocacy center, kind of everybody's just focused on the family. So I wanted to I always like to show kind of what our building looks like. So this is our lobby. As you can see, kind of just looks like a living room. Most child advocacy centers are set up very similar. So when you come in, the lobby normally is very comforting, like a little living room area. We don't have a lot of toys in our lobby. Honestly, we used to have a lot of toys. And during COVID, when, everything kind of shut down for a while, we had gotten rid of a lot. Well, not we locked them up in a closet because we did not want to try to sanitize all these toys in between every interview. And nobody really missed the toys. And it was actually a little bit less distracting, and kids didn't. We've had kids in the past want to bring the toys in the interview room. So we just decided back then, I thought a year had gone by, nobody really missed the toys. We donated all of them. So we have, you could coloring books, crayons. I always keep papers out that kind of go with the seasons. Like right now we have, trick or treat in October pages out. We have some more like adult coloring books for teenagers. Normally they just want to sit in the lobby and scroll their phone. We have the TV, we can stream movies, Netflix, whatever. What you can't see in the picture because it got cut off, we do have a bookshelf full of brand new books that get donated to us for all ages. I mean, even from like baby up to teenager. So we always let kids know, like, if there's any books on there that look interesting to you, like, go ahead and take one. But this is where they enter. They enter right into this room. Our advocate goes out and greets them, goes over some paperwork with the supportive caregiver that is there with the child. And they just kind of hang out. This is where the parent stays while the interview process is happening. This is directly across from our lobby. This is basically, it can be another waiting area if two families happen to overlap. If an interview kind of runs long and the next family gets there, we'll take the second family in here for privacy. There is like a Keurig coffee bar on the left that you can't really see because of the way I have it set up. But families, can go in there whenever they want, make coffee. The circle table you see in the middle, that is for the post-interview meeting with the caregiver that's present. So when the interview's over, law enforcement and DCS will take the caregiver into this room and kind of talk to them about what happened at the interview, what the next steps are going to be, and that sort of thing. This is, ignore my vacuum cleaner in the picture. I didn't realize that till after. So this is what we call the team room. So this is where law enforcement, DCS, prosecution, are sitting and watching the interview. So the interview would be playing on the TV that you see. The nice thing about this room is, if you notice, there's a door that's actually an outside door. So all team members can come directly into this room. We don't really want them coming through the lobby. It can make a kiddo really nervous if they start seeing a lot of people walk in, especially law enforcement. If they see somebody walk through with a gun or a badge, that could be really nerve wracking. A lot of our prosecutors, they're in and out of court, so they may be dressed in like a suit and a tie, which can be really intimidating. So we have just like a little code box on the door. They have a code. They just put their little code in. They come straight into this room. You can't see in the photo, but we have like a full size refrigerator in there. So we always keep snacks, drinks, things like that for our team members. And then we have another kitchen that we keep snacks and drinks and stuff for the family and the kids. Because if a barrier is that a kid is starving because they just came from school, we don't want that to be a barrier. That's very easily taken care of. So we always have like snacks and drinks on hand for the kiddos. If you've never heard of forensic interview, especially when I'm explaining this to parents, that's kind of a scary term to them because they watch Law and Order and SUV and all these things. But what it means is it's a recorded conversation between a child and a specially trained interviewer where we're going to discuss something the child has experienced or witnessed. And we do that using the child's words. So at Kids Talk, we will interview anywhere from ages 3 and up. Basically, I know the screen says 3 to 18. That would be for the minors. We will interview adults for law enforcement or prosecution. especially developmentally delayed adults. There's a couple of us that have some specialized training to interview developmentally delayed adults. So we are asked to do those a lot. We can even interview nonverbal individuals as long as they have the cognitive ability and a way to say yes or no. Even if it's writing, if it's thumbs up, thumbs down, blinking, something like that. If they have a way to communicate yes or no and they can cognitively understand questions, we can interview them. And I'd say age 3 very loosely. I'm sure we all know, depending on the developmental abilities of the child, 3 is, if they can answer simple questions like their name, their favorite color, their favorite toy, something like that, then yes, they are verbal enough to do an interview. If a child cannot answer like simple questions about something they like or something that's easy, they're not going to be able to come in and do an interview about something that's not so easy. So 3 is hit or miss. Even 4 and 5 are hit or miss. Our forensic interviews are always recorded. We use what's called Child First at our center. I would say most centers in Indiana use Child First. Child First is nationally recognized, but there are some other forensic interviewing protocols out there. I will say I have been in training for a lot of them. They are all super, super similar because that's based on research. So no matter the protocol, it's very similar. I already showed you that the team is kind of out of sight and can communicate via the radio. And we want to make sure forensic interviews are age appropriate. That's why we're trained to do them. And that's the reason they can hold up in court is because of the way that we do our interviews. So why is it best for a child to be interviewed at a CAC? First and foremost, we provide a safe place that is away from the alleged perpetrator. So a lot of times if DCS and law enforcement are going out and initiating some sort of report they've received, they are going out to like the home and we all, well, maybe not know. If you don't know, 90% of the time when a child is sexually abused, it's by somebody they know. A lot of times it's somebody that lives in their house with them. So when DCS and law enforcement are going out and initiating these reports and trying to, talk to people and get an investigation going, normally the alleged perpetrator is right there. Sometimes a DCS worker will, take the child outside on the porch. Well, that still does not provide the comfort away from the alleged perpetrator. And so alleged perpetrators are not allowed on our property. We have had them show up multiple times over the years, and we will politely ask them to leave or have law enforcement escort them off the property. Another reason why it's best for them to come to a CAC is because, again, we provide that team approach. We have all the systems that should be investigating the allegations here at one time, getting the information. We have, specialized interviewers. That's what we do. I kind of explain that as if you went to your family doctor and maybe we're having some heart issues, you would probably want your family doctor to refer you to a heart specialist or a heart doctor. So it's kind of the same thing. Yes, DCS and law enforcement and prosecutors are absolutely intelligent and able to probably talk to a child. Is that their specialty? No, that's our specialty. I mean, I myself have interviewed probably 1,500 to 2,000 kids at this point. So that's what I do. I know how to do it the correct way. I know how to legally, defend that if it goes to trial. So that's kind of the importance of that. And then also when the caregivers are at a CAC, then they're going to get some advocacy services while they're there. And we always talk to them about things they may need, and we can do some referrals for them for mental health or just basic needs, help them with protective orders, all the things. So it's just more of a streamlined process. I'm going to go through these really quickly because um, you guys can always look this up. I just like to hit on a couple of like the things we see a lot, especially with our sexual abuse cases. If you're not aware, the legal age of consent in Indiana is 16. So if a child's under that age, they legally cannot consent to any kind of sexual activity. However, there is something called Romeo and Juliet. It's not an exception, but it is a defense. So it's basically if I don't remember all the details, but basically if they've been in this, like a long-term relationship, if it's just 4 years between them and they have this established relationship and both parties say it was consensual, it can be like a defense. So sometimes those won't be filed. So I've always thought those are super interesting. Kids are so sexualized these days that we do run into a lot of like the Romeo and Juliet type stuff. Just different statutes if you ever want to look them up. There is a difference between child molesting and then sexual misconduct with a minor. It's basically the differences in like the ages. So those are different like elements that we have to figure out when we're doing an interview. That's why it's really important when we're doing interviews and investigations to try to nail down like the when things happen or the age of the child when it happened, because it could be two different charges. So those are interesting. So some child advocacy centers do have certain case acceptance criteria where, for example, they may only do interviews if it's sexual abuse allegations, or maybe they'll do sexual abuse allegations and then they will pick and choose. Basically, like DCS has to call them and run the allegations by them, and they will say, like, yes or no, we'll do that. At Kids Talk, we will interview basically for anything. I would love to always operate that way. We are getting busier and busier, so we'll see how that goes in the future. But basically, we will interview for anything that could be criminal. So the majority of our cases are sexual abuse cases. We get a lot of physical abuse, especially marks or bruises. We really want those brought in as soon as possible because those can be battery charges against the individual who caused the marks or bruises. Any kind of neglect, especially witness to domestic violence, witness to drug use, manufacturing, selling. We've had kiddos come in if, DCS has gone out and the house is just deplorable and it was condemned. We've kind of had them come in and discuss, the history of that. And there's a lot of good questions you can ask kids about, who cleans the house and what the plans are for the future house. And a lot of times, if you have a house that's like deplorable or not being taken care of, you're probably going to get like some drug use or DV or mental health issues kind of on top of that. The law enforcement will bring in witness to violent crime. So if we have kiddos who have witnessed any murders, shootings, burglaries, anything like that, they will be brought into Kids Talk. The majority of our referrals do come from DCS. So normally it's an FCM or a family case manager. I keep saying acronyms, and if you don't know what they are, please tell me. But a family case manager from DCS is normally who is calling and setting up an interview. Law enforcement and prosecution can request interviews anytime. So, what we like to do, and I like to pass this along to anybody who may be working with families that would possibly visit a child advocacy center, at some time. So, if you're ever working with a family and you know that their child's going to end up having like a forensic interview at a CAC, it goes a really, really long way if the family is prepared for the visit. Um, I'm not sure why a lot of times newer DCS workers, it's almost like they want to not hide, but it's just like they give the family very vague information about everything. So trying to explain that the family needs to know like the process and what's going to happen and what's a forensic interview, all these things, it makes it better for everybody. So good things to do if you're going to prepare a caregiver to go to a CAC is first, encourage them not to bring a bunch of extra people to the appointment. We have had families show up with like neighbors and friends, and it's just kind of strange. Those are people that probably shouldn't be involved in the business. It's okay for somebody to bring like a support person. We just don't need everybody under the sun at Kids Talk or any other CAC. A lot of child advocacy centers are like us and very small. We don't have a huge lobby for all these people, and it's none of their business. They're not going to be told anything anyway. Our CAC, we have what's called a preparing for your visit brochure. It literally goes over what I'm kind of talking to you guys about is like what's Kids Talk, what's a forensic interview, what happens during the interview, what happens after the interview, all those frequently asked questions. So we provide those brochures to law enforcement and DCS in the hopes that they will pass them along to a caregiver when they set up an interview. Does that always happen? No, but we do our best. We also encourage caregivers to not like pepper their kids with questions about the allegations and to not talk about the allegations with anyone else. Because no matter what parents think, like, oh, I was talking on the phone in the other room or whatever, your kid is probably listening. Parents don't even like think twice. They'll have a conversation on the Bluetooth in their car driving down the road and the kid's in the back seat. So it's just something like your kids don't want you talking about all these allegations with everybody. If their child wants to talk to them, obviously listen. Giving their child permission to talk about the allegations when they go in for the interview, that's huge. And reminding them that they're not in trouble. If you have the chance to talk to a child before they come in for a forensic, fantastic. Because prepping the child can go so far. It's probably more important than prepping the caregiver. So just little things to say to kids is, like, I believe you. You're not in trouble for telling. You're going to talk to these people, that I work with. They're going to ask you some questions about what's going on. You can tell them anything you want to tell them. You're allowed to talk to them. Like, it's okay. When we do body safety at the schools, we have a lot of kids come forward and disclose abuse after presentations. And so we'll make those reports to DCS. And a lot of times, if I'm talking to a kid one-on-one, they've disclosed something and I'm like, I know they're going to end up at Kids Talk for an interview, I go ahead and tell them a lot of, like, I prep them, like, you're going to end up coming to Kids Talk where I work. I always say, like, you'll have like a drink and a snack while you're there. The dog, like, everybody knows my dog now. Slater might be there, and he can probably sit in the interview with you. Like, I'm really glad that you told me all these things, and I want you're going to come in and like talk about everything else with somebody else. So that just goes a really long way if you get that chance. If you're ever talking to a family or they ask you questions about a forensic interview, sometimes the family will, or a parent will think that a forensic interview is their child's testimony. So they sometimes are under the impression if the child is forensically interviewed, then the child does not have to go to court down the road, which is not true. So forensic interviews are rarely used in place of testimony for a lot of reasons. You guys may have went over some of this. I don't remember who the speaker was right before me, but the Constitution says a defendant has a right to face their accuser, even if the accuser is a child, and they have a right to cross-examine them, even if they're a child. So parents just need to know that that's a possibility. Obviously, we don't know that right up front. If I ever get questions about like court and stuff down the road, I answer honestly. I'm like, that is not something that we can answer at this time. Like, that is something that's way down the road that will be talked about and explained to you down the road. So then people want to know, especially parents want to know, well, then what's the point of the forensic and like, why is it recorded? Well, there's lots of reasons why it's recorded. It captures the child's body language, verbal language, any kind of emotional affect, protects me as an interviewer. So, everything I do and say is on video. Every question I ask is on video. If a child does any kind of demonstration, what I mean by that is they could do a demonstration with like their body, but we also have anatomically correct dolls that we can use, especially for younger kids who are having a hard time verbalizing certain things because they don't know a lot about sexual acts. So sometimes they're able to show you what happened using dolls. So a demonstration would be on camera. And a lot of times in a jury trial, if the child has done some sort of demonstration in an interview, the judge may allow certain parts of the interview in. So they may show like a portion of the interview to the jury. So it could be the portion where the child does a demonstration with the dolls. We sometimes use interview aids such as anatomically correct drawings where a child may, circle a penis because maybe they've called it a PP. We can't assume that the PP is the penis. So I've gotten, drawings out to have them clarify. They've circled penis, like this is the PP, and I've labeled it. So all that will be recorded. Sometimes kids draw things we have easel paper in our interview room, just like one of those big square easel paper boards. And I've had kiddos like draw sex toys. They don't know that that's what it is, but they're trying to explain to me what something was. And I've had kids draw like a purple vibrator. I know it's a purple vibrator. They don't. So, but they draw it and I know exactly what it is. And they explain to me that it would buzz and you would push this button. Well, all those things, are then recorded and then that's given to law enforcement as evidence. Recordings are used for a lot of things. One, to minimize their trauma. What I mean by that is if for some reason, law enforcement's busy. So let's say we have an interview. We do 4, 5, 6 interviews a day. Sometimes they can all be the same department. We have a lot of police departments in our jurisdiction. So let's say the detective is able to come for a couple. Maybe they get called out on like an emergency, like a murder case or something that happened a couple weeks ago, and they miss a couple. Well, then they're able to come pick up the disc. They don't have to go by my summary of the interview. They're able to watch it themselves and listen to what the child said. Kind of aids them in their investigation. Most detectives tell me that they take notes during the interview, but then they also will go back and listen to the interview again and just make sure that they are noting any of the things they need to go corroborate, which is really nice. So our prosecutor's office is not strict, but kind of, they want photos of certain things. They want you to follow up with anybody that child mentioned in the interview, described, how a house is set up. They want you to go and like photograph that. Anything that can corroborate anything that child said. And so a lot of times law enforcement will listen to that again. When cases are submitted to our prosecutor's office for review of charges, the prosecutor's office will get a hold of me pretty much every day. I'm uploading interviews into, it's called Axon. I'm sure you guys maybe some of you are familiar with it. It's their evidence system. So I'll drop the interview in there and then the prosecutors can review it, make sure that the charges submitted match what was said in the interview. The interviews are discoverable, so they are given to defense attorneys. And a lot of times those are then used to kind of negotiate plea agreements where client have watched the interview. Then a lot of times they're like, okay, when a child comes to court or comes to prepare for court, so the very first time they meet with the prosecutor's office to prepare for a jury trial, one of the very first things that they do is they watch their forensic interview as kind of like a preparation because sometimes they're going to court a couple years past. We've kind of already talked about this, but why it's important to have a specialized interviewer because even though the recordings are not going to be used in lieu of testimony, it's entered as evidence. Parts of it can be played for the jury. There's usually a transcript made, and then that's how defense will form questions as they'll go through your transcript and try to pick things out. So you want somebody that can get on the stand and defend what they do and explain the protocol. I think it's really important that it should be somebody that's not making case decisions. So, like, I have no dog in the fight. I don't care if it's not my job to get a disclosure. It's my job to provide a space for a child to talk about something if they have something to talk about. So I don't care which way the case goes. I'm not trying to arrest anybody. I literally do the interview and that's it. I don't do anything else on the case. We normally have, so according to research, we only have about 5 minutes per age of the child or per year of the age of the child before we kind of lose them. And and especially kids with ADHD, you probably have a little less because they're like a little fly on the wall flying around your room when you're in there. So you want somebody that is well trained to get the information quickly, but like effectively and in the appropriate way. You can kind of see like half of our interview room. It's very basic. It's like a chair. There's a couch on the other side that you can't see that the kiddo sits on. And then we have the easel board. Slater sits in on pretty much every interview I do, unless the child does not want him in there. His favorite place to be is the interview room because he's allowed to get on the couch in the interview room. And he does what's called a cover command. Most kiddos want him to. I've never had a kid say no. I'll say, do you care if he gets up here and lays with you? He likes to snuggle. Well, yeah. So he'll get up there and I just tell him cover and he will literally lay right across their lap. And that is his favorite place to be. So he's been a great addition to our interview. So the child first protocol, I'm not going to go through all the phases, but it basically consists of 4 phases: rapport, transition to the topic of concern, explore details, and closure. Nice thing about child first protocol is it's very fluid. So it's not a rigid protocol where you have to hit all of these phases. What I mean by that is, let's say a kiddo comes in and I'm getting to know them in rapport and we've hardly talked about anything. Like I always ask kids, like, what do you like to do? And that thing, things like that. And if the kid's like, well, did you know that my Uncle Johnny touched my pee pee? Like they have disclosed and we are moving on to explore details. I'm not going to be like, okay, well, I just want to get to know you first. So that's the nice thing about it. And that is completely okay. I have followed the protocol because the protocol is to do what's in the best interest of the child. So that's really nice. The types of questions that we ask in an interview, we kind of use what I call an hourglass method. And we obviously want the majority of our questions to be open-ended, but you can't just say, tell me, tell me, tell me the whole time in an interview. You're going to exhaust a child. They're going to be over it. Sometimes you have to narrow something down and open it back up. So an open-ended example is like, tell me what happened or tell me more about that. A direct would be like, where did that happen? And if a child says, at my uncle's house, okay, tell me more about it being at your uncle's house. It's kind of how you open it back up. Option posing is where you do, was it this, or something else? You always have to have the something else at the end. So I have an example on the screen. Was it on top of the clothes, underneath the clothes? I didn't spell the right. Underneath the clothes or something else. And if they say it was on top of the clothes, okay, tell me more about it being on top of the clothes. Or if they say it was underneath the clothes, tell me more about it being underneath the clothes. So anytime we ask them more of like a direct question, interviewers should be opening that back up to an open-ended question to explore. I also teach child first forensic interviewing, so I probably hit on that more than anybody. This is a really nice visual, just in case anybody on here isn't going to be working with children or anything like that. So this table kind of shows you what kind of information you can expect from a child, like based on their age. So the dark blue is what a child that age should be able to answer. The light blue is, if they're developmentally on track, then they may be able to answer the light blue. So for example, a 3-year-old, you may get a who and a what. So like, Johnny touched my pee-pee. They may not be able to answer the one time or more than one time or a where. They are not going to be able to sequence anything. They may not be able to explain any like circumstances around it, give you episodic details, which is like putting it in order. So that sort of thing. And then if you look for even our 10 and older, the light blue for the when is still hard for them. And if you remember earlier when I was talking about the way the laws are, when is very, very important when in the criminal world. But there are ways around that. So you can't really ask a kid like, when did that happen? Well, they don't know. So a lot of times we start with like, how old were you when that happened? And if they're kind of having a hard time with that. Do you remember what grade of school you were in? Oh, yeah, I was in third. Well, what makes you remember you were in third grade? Like, what was your teacher's name? All the things can we corroborate that they were at, this elementary school in third grade with Mrs. Smith? So that's kind of how you get around that. So I kind of explained this earlier. I showed you the room. DCS and law enforcement will meet with the caregiver after the interview, provide them with some information, talk to them about next steps. If a child needs a sexual assault exam, an advocate from Kids Talk will help with getting that set up, or if they need a protective order, will also help with getting the protective order in. This is kind of just to show you the flow of normally how an investigation comes in and like how we're contacted. So normally it's DCS has gotten an assessment, or permanency means DCS already has a case open with a family, and maybe they've had this case open, a child was removed, maybe the child's been in therapy and now the child's disclosing other things that happened. So it could be assessment or permanency calling us. So they'll call, come to Kids Talk where they get their forensic interview, victim advocacy. It could come from our prevention program. Then there's the criminal investigation that happens. Let's say the child makes a disclosure, charges are submitted to the prosecutor's office, and then it could go, to a criminal trial or a plea. We don't know. So the advocacy services that we provide at our center, there are a lot of centers that are very similar. They may not do all the things that we do. They may do more than we do. I don't know how all of them work, but I know we're kind of similar. We try to do what's called a prep phone call. So normally the day before the interview is scheduled, we'll try to reach out to the caregiver and introduce ourselves. I'll do a lot of the prep things that I talked to you guys about, as far as like not bringing extra people, all these things, what's going to happen when you get here, make sure they know what time their interview is. That seems to be an issue. How to get to the center, where to park, any of those things. I like to ask them if there's anything, is there anything we need to know about your child? Is there anything that's going to make it easier for them? A lot of times parents have questions like, can they bring a stuffed animal? Yes, they can, they can bring, I don't want to say anything, but they can bring like a comfort item, a blanket, whatever. I like to know if kids have diagnoses up front that maybe DCS didn't know about or didn't ask. So a lot of that is in a prep phone call. If they answer, the day of the interview, when the family arrives, whichever advocate is going to be assigned to the case will go out and greet them. We go over just initial paperwork with them, answer any questions they have at that time. We always ask the kids if they have questions. We take kiddo and parent down the hallway, show them the interview room. That way the parent knows where the child's going to be. And then the child kind of has time to process, what the snacks, drinks, all the things during the interview. So once the child goes into the interview room, the advocate will go back out, meet with the caregiver. That's kind of the time they have to go over any needs they might need. Maybe they have been looking into mental health services for the child, so we can help them, get referrals put in for that. They may be at the center because their child was allegedly molested, but they may be worried about how they're going to put food on the table or pay their electric bill. So we can do some referrals to like community partners or energy assistance. We bought somebody a Christmas tree a couple years ago. It was close to Christmas. They didn't have a Christmas tree. We've helped families find Thanksgiving dinners around Thanksgiving, all the things the advocates do that people don't know about. We will also assist them in scheduling a sexual assault exam if their child needs one based on the interview, or if the parent just wants them to have one. We will get them that set up for them. We always talk to them about a protective order if that's something they're interested in, and we will help them do that like online while they're there. So help them type everything out, get it printed, have them sign it. We will take it to the courthouse for them and file it. And then we do follow-up advocacy. So I actually have a half-time advocate who is purely remote. So she's 100% remote. About 7 to 10 days after a family comes through Kids Talk, she will contact the caregiver and basically just do a check-in call, like, "How are you doing?" She'll read our notes from, the day they were in to kinda see what was talked about then and what referrals were done, and then she just touches base on, were you able to get, like, a therapy appointment set up? Did somebody contact you from community partners? Maybe they were on the fence about a protective order, so she can check in on that and just anything they need. How are they doing? How's the child doing? Any questions? So that's great. And she's also bilingual, which is fantastic. So even our Spanish speaking families, we do not have to go through an interpreter to do a lot of our advocacy. She will handle those for us. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, just different types of child abuse, a little bit of statistics, and then grooming. So the different types of child abuse. So physical abuse is just non-accidental injury by a parent or caregiver. So this is well beyond like physical discipline. This is, leaving a lot of bruises and welts and burns, unexplained injuries, broken bones. For some reason, we've seen multiple kiddos with bite marks this past year. We were just talking about this the other day, how strange it is. I didn't really run into that at DCS. I don't know where this is coming from, but I've had multiple kids come in with legit like adult bite marks on them, which is very strange to me. Signs to look out for. Obviously, if a child is like super fearful of their parent or caregiver, they don't want to go home. Maybe they're wearing, clothes that don't really fit the weather. Now, I have a kiddo myself that loves to wear a hoodie when it's 100 degrees outside. I promise he's not being physically abused. So I tell teachers all the time, that doesn't mean that they're being physically abused, but if they are trying to cover up, their body because they have bruises or something, and they're just wary around adults. Depression. Sometimes you see kind of the opposite where kids are just like super eager to please any of the adults around. As I go through these, you're going to notice the behavioral signs for every type of abuse and neglect is super similar. So for neglect, this is basically a parent that is not providing the basic needs. So food, clothing, shelter, medical care, education, supervision, those sorts of things. So some physical signs can be kiddos who are underweight because you're not getting enough food. Again, inappropriate clothing for the weather, poor hygiene, kiddos sleeping through class at school or just always tired because maybe there's a lot of domestic violence going on in the home and they're not getting any sleep, or parents are partying all night because they're using drugs. An obvious lack of medical or dental care. Behavior signs. I swear I can always pick out some of these kiddos when we go do body safety. They crave attention. I think probably when I go in and do a presentation in the classroom throughout the day, there's at least like 4 or 5 kiddos who they don't know me. They immediately want to like hug on me. And you can always just tell like they just really need some attention. Kiddos who are always hungry, or maybe they're stealing food or hoarding food, depression, kiddos who are absent all the time or tardy to school, or maybe they just turn to like drug and alcohol use themselves. And then we have our sexual abuse. Because if you look at research, most sexual abuse disclosures from kiddos are super delayed. It's it's rare that kids are sexually abused and then immediately tell somebody. So there's not always a lot of physical signs, but there can be. So obviously, like difficulty or pain walking or sitting. If a child is pregnant under the age of 16, that's very concerning. We will see younger kids who get recurring urinary tract infections, and then it turns out, somebody's been molesting them. Kiddos who get sexually transmitted infection, that's very concerning. Genital rashes, itching, pain, burning, that sort of thing should be concerning. Behavioral signs that could be very concerning is age inappropriate sexual knowledge. We will see this sometimes. So let's say we have a 7-year-old that puts their penis in like a 5-year-old's mouth. Well, how in the world does a 7-year-old know to put their penis in a 5-year-old's mouth? That is concerning. So we would love to interview the 7-year-old about, has something happened to them? Did somebody show them pornography? Did they find pornography? Like, where did they learn how to do that? So that's kind of what I mean by that. You may see a kiddo just who had straight A's, and then all of a sudden now they get D's and F's at school, self-harming behavior, sleep problems. You may have a child who has been potty trained for quite some time, and then all of a sudden they're having accidents. Kids who become very secret. In sex trafficking cases, you'll see kids hide cash, hide phones, all those things. or come home with devices that they didn't have. So let's talk about grooming. So grooming is basically the process by which offenders kind of pick their victims, draw them in, sexualize their relationship, and then get that child to keep it a secret. It's kind of like the grooming process if you've never heard of that. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what normally happens in the grooming process. So a perpetrator will kind of target a child. A lot of times they'll look for kids who have like a void to fill. So a lot of times it's kiddos with like a chaotic home life, or parents that just aren't present, or parents are drug users, whatever it may be. So they know that that kiddo needs attention, or they need their basic needs met, or whatever it may be. So they'll start to pay special attention to them. Then they'll start to gain the trust of that child's parent or caregiver because they want to lower suspicion. Like, I'm this nice guy, I'm coming in, I'm helping you, I'm driving your kid to school, I helped you with your light bill, I bought you some groceries. Like, I'm just this good guy who just wants to help you out. Then they always start to find like a need that the child may have. So maybe this child's never had, name brand clothes, or they've wanted this cell phone forever, whatever it may be, money, I'm taking you out to dinner. They're kind of filling a need that this child needs met. Then they'll start to move toward kind of isolating the child. They'll create circumstances where they're alone with the child. So maybe they offer to babysit. Maybe they start coaching the child's baseball team, take them on this special trip, take them on a movie day. So they're starting to create a sense with this child that, like, I love you and I understand you in a way that nobody else does. So they're creating this relationship. Then they want to start to sexualize the relationship. This normally starts like the kid doesn't even know what's happening. So maybe they talk about sexual things. I've had kiddos tell me, "Oh yeah, he would ask me like, had I ever given a blowjob and did I know what that was? Or have I ever had sex with anybody? And what would I do if I had sex with anybody? What kinds of things did I do with my boyfriend?" Then it could be pictures. They may create situations where they accidentally see the child naked, or the child accidentally sees them naked, maybe like walking in on the child when they know the child's changing, or they may be changing, they'll leave the bathroom door open when they know the child's going to walk down the hallway, anything like that. A lot of times you'll have perpetrators ask the child about masturbation, or like, I'm going to show you how to do this, or I'm going to show you what you should do with your boyfriend, that sort of thing. And then once they have sexualized the relationship and the sexual abuse is actually happening, they will start to like make the threats and use the secrecy and the blame game to get that child, like they're maintaining control to get that child to stay connected with them. It's a lot of things of like, if you tell anyone, like, I'll go to jail, you'll get in trouble too because you've been doing this with me. Like, you'll lose your house, I'm paying the rent here, your mom can't afford it, all of these different things. So all the reasons why, kids don't tell. Nobody will believe you. I hear that a lot. So things we can do, especially as advocates in this field, is start by believing. So I don't ever just not want to believe a child when they disclose something. It's not my job to prove whether it's true or not. It's my job to gain as much information as I can. But I don't think a child should just be like swept under the rug just because they're a child. So based on research, 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before they turn 18. Of that, 20% are abused before the age of 8. So little kids. False reports are really rare. So 96% of reports are valid. I know you'll hear a lot of people in this field talk about like kids make stuff up all the time, kids tell stories all the time, kids are coached, all these things. But according to research, 96% of reports are valid. I already said this earlier, but in 90% of child sexual abuse cases, they are sexually abused by somebody that they know. So it's not like it's strangers off the street. I have nothing against the stranger danger talks that they do with kids, but that's not reality. The reality is, I tell kids when we teach prevention and we go over body safety rules, we talk about how a lot of times it's going to be your trusted adults that are going to be the ones that break your body safety rules. And even if it's a trusted adult and somebody that you love, it's still not okay. And you need to tell all the things. 60% of child sexual abuse victims never tell anyone. I hate that statistic because if you think about it, we're only getting 40% of these child sexual abuse victims that are coming forward. So we better do the best job we can do with the 40% that come forward, because we have a lot that aren't coming forward. I already said this as well. It's mostly delayed disclosures. There's rarely any physical evidence or witnesses in child sexual abuse cases. People are not molesting kids in front of other people. They're not leaving evidence places, and kids aren't telling until far away, down the road. So there is no evidence. I can probably count on one hand cases where we have been able to get physical evidence because a kid did disclose pretty quickly in one of my cases, and he took it all the way to a jury trial. Apparently, he told his attorney he had nothing to lose, but a man had been sexually abusing his biological daughter for a couple years, full on sex, had talked to her about taking her to another country and marrying her, wanted to have children with her. She had started her period a few months before our interview, and he was buying her pregnancy tests, and she had just had enough. Like, she was over it. If she didn't want to do it, he would like hit her, take things away. And so she disclosed to a friend because she told me she knew her friend would tell her parents and she knew that the friend's parents would report it. So she was very methodical in the way that she disclosed. And in her interview, we brought her in right away, obviously, because she lived with dad. And when I was talking to her about the last time something happened, it was the day before. She had not showered. She had on different clothes, but her clothes had not been washed. So she was able to tell me where, her clothes were, which bed they had sex on, what the sheets were. Her dad had like wiped himself off with a towel. She explained where the towel was, just all the things that we needed. Sent her for an immediate sexual assault exam, and it did come back that his DNA was in her vaginal cavity. I mean, you can't deny that. They went and got the sheets, the towel that she talked about, her clothes, and everything, had evidence on it. So that's the one that sticks out in my mind, but that's very rare. That's like a unicorn in this type of work. Yeah, he took that to trial. Super interesting. And the child statement is enough. If a child gives you a good statement and is able to explain to you what happened and what it felt like and what it looked like and what it tasted, I say this to people all the time. You may be able to coach a child to say like a statement like, so and so touched me. Yeah, you could coach a kid to say that. You can't coach a child to give all the sensory details around what happened, what they saw, what they heard, what it felt like, what it tasted like, all the thing, what it felt like on their body. And their statement is enough in these cases. A lot of times we'll see teenagers who are really acting out, running away. We'll have like chronic runaway cases. In those cases, I think it's worth looking into a little bit more. If you have a child who is chronically running away, I call it like the push pull. There's normally either something in their house pushing them out or there's something outside the house pulling them out. And we've got to figure out like what is going on. Maybe they're not just a bad kid that's running away all the time. Maybe there's something going on. 80 to 90% of kids who are sexually abused will go on to have like drug and alcohol issues, emotional issues. They may be delinquent, they'll get into crime. So that's why it's so important as advocates to work with the kiddos and especially their caregivers on getting them into services. Just because your child seems fine now, I have this conversation with caregivers all the time. Just because your child seems fine now does not mean that down the road something's going to peak out. Like they're going to get triggered by something. So making sure that you have really addressed and they have really processed what has happened, what is happening. We don't want them to go on to use drugs. And we all know that offenders are really good at picking victims that nobody will believe. They're going to pick the kids who maybe are already the delinquents that are already getting in trouble or have their own criminal issues that, aren't the best victims to put on the stand. Perpetrators are super smart and manipulative. Okay, all that. If you have questions, you can unmute or put it in the chat, and I'm going to look at the chat here in a second. But my email address is on here. I sent my slides. I think they'll be sent to you guys to look over. And if you're not aware of the DCS hotline, I put the hotline up there as well.